Hi there, and welcome to Programming Tutorials by Ideations Tech. In this tutorial, we'll be talking about the Django REST framework. Let's get started. What is the Django REST framework? The Django REST framework is a powerful and flexible toolkit for building web APIs. It is a framework built upon Django, so technically it's not a separate framework. It's a tool, it's an addition, which is used for developing REST APIs only. And it increases the development speed a lot and addresses many security issues. So common security issues which web apps might have, like clickjacking, CSRF, cross-site request forgery, cross-site scripting, XSS, that kind of stuff. Now, what are the reasons to use Django REST framework? Well, if you're going to go ahead and make a REST API that has quality, then the Django REST framework is there to prove that quality is what is put first. Now, the features that are involved within the Django REST framework are the web browsable API. So this is a very convenient feature. The web browsable API, if you're tired of using Postman or making manual API requests, then the Django REST framework provides you with a web browsable interface where you can interact and test your APIs. The documentation is very clean and organized, so if you're ever having trouble, I highly recommend you take a look at the documentation, as the solutions or whatever things are written about the Django REST framework, such as functionalities, additions, they can be of a lot of help. Now, the next thing is generic views and auto building from models. So this is for a later video, so be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button for more exciting content. Generic views they will allow us to go ahead and make API views, which we'll talk about in a moment, within like 4 lines of code. So if we want to make logic that is for creating data or updating or deleting data, we can instantly go ahead and make that API functionality with a few lines of code. Then we have authentication. Django supports, the Django REST framework supports many authentication methods, so like JWT, OAuth2, these two are recommended, however. Then we have permissions. So the permissions, we can go ahead and make custom permissions. The Django REST framework really lets us, go loose, because it's not only like batteries included, but it's also very customizable. We can do as we wish. We can make our backend however we want. Throttling, that's for another lesson, but it's basically for restricting or minimizing traffic, like putting a limit. Data filtering via parameters. Now, Django lets you filter, like it lets you create your own custom filters, or it provides many built-in classes which you can use to start filtering through your data. Then again, that's for a future lesson. And then we have pagination, 4 different pagination modes. So number, offset, time, and normal pagination. So that's for another lesson as well. Now, the biggest reason to use the Django REST framework is because it's so easy to use and it makes serialization a piece of cake. Doing serialization is literally a slice of cake. Literally. It's that easy. And we're going to talk about serialization in just a moment. Now, what are you going to learn in this lesson? So we're going to go ahead and talk about how to set up a Django project properly, how to create and activate isolated virtual environments for our project, so our project doesn't have to interact with an outside environment, and also how models and serialization work together. So let's get started. Here I am at VS Code, and I've created an empty folder named API project. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead first make my virtual environment. So I'll say virtual env, and then I'll say venv. And venv is the name for my virtual environment. I just want to keep it simple. Okay, great. And now I'm just going to go ahead and say source venv/bin/activate. This will allow me to go ahead and now install packages within that isolated environment. So we'll say pip3 install Django REST framework, and just by installing this, it'll get the required libraries for us. So no need to install anything extra. Okay, as you can see, it installed the required things, including Django. Now it's time to go ahead and create an app and a project. So Django admin, start, project, and we're going to say API project, just to keep the name simple, API project, and we're going to keep a dot. So the dot means that we don't want any subfolders creating. We want our project to be created within this folder that we are in right now. So let's go ahead and run that. And as you can see, batteries included, the files that I need are right there provided by Django. Then Django admin, start app, and we're going to go ahead and say API. I just like to keep the name API. All right, and there we go. We have our app folder with the batteries included as well. Now, what's the difference between an app and a project? So a project is like the root, the heart and soul of your API or your project, whatever. So it has the settings, the server file, the configuration, and things like that. So ignore ASGI and WSGI. The settings. So the initial thing we need to do for setup is we need to go into the settings and we need to put an asterisk inside of the allowed host. So this will allow you to run the project or start a local server on any host. Then we need to add a few things to the installed app. So the project should know that we will be utilizing REST framework. We want to use REST framework. Remember, I told you this is an addition. REST framework is an add-on. We want to use Django, but for only REST APIs. And now we're going to register API. So our app name, we need to tell the Django project that, yep, this is also affiliated with what we're building. You can have multiple apps, but there will be only one project. And it depends on like what you're building. Middleware, this is security stuff. So the middleware, as I mentioned earlier during the slides. And then we also have the templates. Now, this is not what we're going to be dealing with because there are two types of things. So traditional Django and then Django REST. So traditional Django uses templating like HTML templates, CSS, and static files. And we can make websites with it. So back and front end. So the MVT are way of doing things, model view templating. But with Django REST framework, that's only REST APIs, so the backend for a mobile or web app. Next, we have the database configuration. Django by default provides us with SQLite 3, but we can add any SQL configuration we want, like Postgres or MySQL. And once again, all these tutorials will be coming up, so be sure to like and subscribe. And do share this epic video. Auth password validators. Now this is where things get interesting. More security things to make sure that the passwords we keep are, up to the security standards. And some miscellaneous stuff like time zone and language code. All right, now what about our app folder? So the admin is where you go ahead and you want to monitor the data that's flowing through the database. So you have access to all the data in your database. Then we have the app. So this is just the app name, app config. We're not going to be using this. Models. This is where the data, this is where your data models are created. So we don't need SQL. We don't need to know SQL. We can just go ahead and create our data models in Python, and then Django will migrate them, or you can say push them to a database into SQL, and we don't have to worry about a thing. Then we have views. Views is where all the logic happens. So serializers, a file we haven't created, but we will. Serializers and models, they will come together and work together to inside of views so that they can make the functionality possible, because then again, an API is the mediator between a user, so a client, and the database. And that's what backends are about. Data, continuous processing of data and functionalities and logic, business logic applying to that data. So let's go to the models and create our first model. We're going to say class post. Models.model. I want to inherit the model class from the models module, which is already imported, and this will give me access to fields. So the first field would be title. Title equals models.char field. So a char field, and we're going to set the max length, which is a required argument, to 60. Then we want the timestamp. So when was the object created? So timestamp equals models.datetime field. And we're going to set auto now add equals true. Now, the best thing about this is, actually the best thing about Django REST framework is that we have all these small tweaks we can do to make the API even better in functionality. So an object represents something that's being made from a blueprint. Now, in our case, we have this class. What makes up a post? A title, a timestamp, and the content. So we want to go ahead and make a object out of all this. So an object would be a post. Now, once an object is created, auto now add, the timestamp will automatically be added. So what date and time was this object created, this post? And then we're going to go ahead and say content equals models.text field. Now the text field is a bigger char field, so that because the content will be huge, so you know a typical post has full-fledged content, so you would not be using a char field, you would just be saying text field. And if you look, you have many fields you can use, and with good time and more of these awesome videos, we're going to explore many of these, so stay tuned. Now I'm also going to add def underscore str, and this is for string representation. Now I'm going to get to in a while why we use this. Oh, wonder what happened here. Oh, one moment. All right, sorry, forgot to activate it. Now str return self.title. Okay, we have our models ready. Let's go ahead and migrate them. So we want to push this all to SQL. So the default SQLite database. We're going to go ahead and say Python 3 manage.py, and the manage.py file is used for your migrations and running more of the setups. So collecting static files, making migrations, opening a shell session for interacting with some things in our database using the ORM API. So ORM is Object Relational Mapper, and it's an API which Django provides to easily interact with your database. But all in good time, we'll get to those exciting lectures very soon. So Python 3 manage.py make migrations, and then we're going to say API. Okay, look what it says here, created model post. If I go into migrations and I click on that initial.py file, these are the initial migrations. So Django has prepared what it's going to push to the database. Now to actually push it, we're going to say Python 3 manage.py migrate. And it goes ahead and migrates everything. All the tables that are required, like sessions, users, groups, whatever, they're all migrated, and we did not write a single speck of SQL. Now let's go ahead and fill up our admin file. So we'll have to import models since we're connecting to a model class from .import models. And we're going to say admin.site.register models.post. So we want to connect to the post model. Okay. Now I think we've seen enough code, right? We want to go ahead and experiment. So we're going to go ahead and create a super user for our admin. The admin panel is something that comes by default with Django, and it's located at this URL. So we're going to go ahead and say Python 3 manage.py create super user, and this will create a super user for us which can access the admin panel. So I'm going to say admin, and I'm just going to leave the email blank. Okay, I'm going to call this password test. All right, yep, y, create, yep. Okay, now we're going to say Python 3 manage.py run server, and this will start up our server. So we're going to copy this local address. Let's go let's open a new window, sorry, new private window. Okay, I'm going to paste that URL and we get a success message. The install was successful, great, meaning you did everything right in setting up the Django project. Now, if I go to /admin, we get the admin panel. And now I'm going to fill in the credentials I went ahead and created at the terminal. So I'll say admin, and then I'll say test. Oh, okay, great. And as you can see, by adding, if I go back to VS Code, by adding the model, the data model we created to the admin, so admin.site.register models.post, we now have posts right here. Let's go ahead and create something. So I'll say title is going to be my first post, and we'll say, oh, my bad. And then we're going to go ahead and say, this is some exciting content. I'm going to save. Okay, it went ahead and saved. Now notice we're getting the title as the face of our object, and that's because of our models, the str we put here, the representation. What if I comment this out? Then if I reload this, we get post object 1. Now this looks a bit really off the record because we don't know what post object 1 is. Therefore, we're going to use string representation to represent whatever the title is. We want to make it the face of the object. So now if I go back, there we go, my first post. And now to wrap up the lesson, we're going to talk about serializers, and we're going to take a look at the database. So let's open our database, db.sqlite3, and let's go to the post table. So the class name will become the table name, and then if you look at it, we have the fields which we created. How cool is that? So now I'm going to go ahead and say show table, and look at that. The content, the timestamp automatically added, the title, it's saved in our database. So mission accomplished. Now, what about the serializers? So serialization and deserialization is all about transporting data. And our serializers are going to be based off of our model fields. Serialization is the process of packing and unpacking data. So serialization is when the client wants to get data from the database, the data will be packed into JSON and then sent to the client side. And then the user will see JSON data coming from the API. Now, when the user wants to save something to the database via the API, then that's called deserialization. And that's when we're taking JSON data, but then we are unpacking it once it reaches the database and putting those values in their respective fields. So title, timestamp, and content, for example. Serializers will be created like this, very simple. So we can say from REST framework, import serializers. And then we're going to also say from .import models, because we don't want to create our serializers from scratch. We want to go ahead and create them by our models. So whatever our model fields are, we want those to be our serializable fields. We'll say class post serializer, and then we'll inherit from serializers.model serializer. And this is simply saying that we want our serializers to be model based. That's why we're inheriting model serializer class from the serializers module. Now we're going to say class meta, and then we're going to say model equals models.post. Now we're specifying here this attribute that the model we want to set for our serializers is models.post. And then we're just going to set the fields. So which fields do we want to include? And for this, I'll just say all. And our fields are ready. So this is our serializers. And more will be explained in the next tutorial. So be sure to share the video, like and subscribe, and hit that bell icon for the next upcoming exciting video where we complete this project step by step.